I want to spend a little bit of time tonight talking about my thoughts on the Assassin's Creed Valhalla gameplay and kind of my thoughts on how we got here. Not how we got to the leak. Obviously, that's somebody who worked on the game, who wanted to impress their friends or whatever. Unfortunately, and I see this all the time, these NDAs are constantly being broken. Some of the leaks, or at least the conspiracy theories like to maintain this, that some of these leaks are actually done by the company themselves to see kind of what people think. But in my experience, the game is so far along in development now that if everybody wildly hated something, it would be too late to change it anyway. So I'm not really so sure I buy off on that piece of it. I really fell in love with Assassin's Creed, as many of you did, with the first title back in 2007. That was the game that I think really changed for me third person exploration games. And although Ubisoft was a known company, to me, this is what really kind of solidified them. We'd seen some Splinter Cell games prior to this, but this one, this particular Assassin's Creed, this open world that was unlike anything I had really seen before, really just sparked my curiosity. And I think what helped so much was you had such a phenomenal main character, an Altair, who I loved. I thought he was really cool. The fact that he could climb anywhere, that you had all these different mission types that you could partake, this huge wide open world, and a really riveting story about this guy trying to find this hidden relic lost, to this rival group of these Templars. Then you kind of put all that up and like bundle that up, and then you have this other story outside of it with this long lost ancestor, Desmond, and him being kind of forced to recall these memories. And the way that those two stories fused together, I thought was incredible. Now, I think a lot of us can agree that by the time Assassin's Creed 3 came along and it kind of wrapped up that original story, it largely fell flat. And it was really clear to me, at least, that Ubisoft didn't really know what they were trying to do with this story. It really started to fall apart. But in that transition from 1 to 3, I think Assassin's Creed tried a little bit too much in terms of things to do. And I think that story kind of fell flat. It really wasn't to me until Black Flag did we see a huge departure from the original series. And I'm not glossing over Ezio because I didn't care for him. He was phenomenal as well. And all of his trilogy of games with Brotherhood and Revelation were insanely good. Those games really kind of honed in, I think, and almost in a bad way, kind of staled that franchise in a sense. And I love Ezio. I think his story was fun and the gameplay was cool. But by the end, other than traversing up and down walls slightly faster thanks to some gadgets that he had, the gameplay itself really wasn't being thrust forward in any wild direction. And it did get kind of stale, despite the fact you had all these really cool cameos of famous people through the times giving him inventions and him intersecting with key points in history. That really leads us to, Assassin's Creed 3, which to me was just a total failure of the series. I have spent a long time talking about that game, and needless to say, it was atrocious. Thankfully, Black Flag did bring a nice welcome change, particularly with the naval combat, but it was in that game that Assassin's Creed lost the idea of a really, in my opinion, unique original story. You are a nameless, faceless Abstergo agent working to kind of uncover the past of this weird relic. Again, another piece of Eden. And while Black Flag was phenomenal, you did not play as an assassin. There really was no creed. You weren't trying to build up anything. You were just a guy who killed an assassin and pretended to be one, basically for self gratification. And while the naval combat system was phenomenal, and while it did really push the idea of open world traversal, it didn't do much in terms of kind of that core gameplay. And basically, you were still doing a lot of the same ways to fight people. You were basically a parrying machine, just standing there waiting and, perfect parrying, killing enemies. And I kind of really fell off the series after that. I completely skipped over Rogue and Unity, Syndicate. I thought all of those three games just looked like more of the same. It really wasn't until Origins did everything radically change, and it was good that Assassin's Creed proper took some time off between the release of Syndicate and Origins. There was a 2 year gap, and that's important because we're going to get to Valhalla in a minute. But that 2 year gap is really important because prior to then, Assassin's Creed was basically an annual franchise, and during that 2 year period, they basically completely changed the formula. You started to get a very different type of game. They injected a lot of standard kind of RPG elements in terms of weapon gear, in terms of like stat points. You really started to be able to customize your character and find gear that not only changed the way you looked, but radically changed the way you played. And that's a very wild departure from my beloved original Assassin's Creed, where Altair had like two weapons. I guess three if you want to include the hidden blade, but very, very limited combat options, very basic upgrades that really only gave you either, I think at that time it was just more health. You could upgrade different pieces of gear just to give your health meter a slight boost. Really, in Origins, that's when we really started to see more modifiers in weapons like fire damage. And you really started to kind of really bring in a heavy injection of loot grinding and loot gear and almost kind of a gear score. That was cool. I didn't really like Origins, though. I didn't care about the story at all. Bayek was not interesting to me. I just thought his adventures were not that exciting. And while they tried to rekindle, they being Ubisoft, tried to rekindle some of that magic from what they had done with the original Assassin's Creed and giving us a proper present day protagonist who hooked up to an animus to go back in time, it just didn't really seem to connect with me. And I think critically it was a major success. It definitely handled way better than a lot of games. And even to this day, it's still a very, very solid action game, but didn't really feel for it. And unfortunately, I maybe because of the success of that game, I'm not really sure. Ubisoft fell right back into that annual model again, releasing Odyssey just 1 year later. Now, a lot of people really liked Odyssey. It was really, to me, more of Origins. However, this time there was a major emphasis on the story that allowed you to play as a brother or a sister that did have tie-ins to the story later on. I didn't beat it, but I know enough about it to kind of know what happened. And I'm going to leave it spoiler free because it's still relatively new enough that people might not have yet completed it. So don't worry, I'm not going to give anything away there. But it was cool because there were some dialogue options that did lightly change the story. There were some more side quests that seemed to be more relevant. And you had a lot more traversal, it seemed like, with anything really. But they had really learned their lesson by this time, and they had really taken the best of all of the previous installments in the Assassin's Creed franchise and made a really solid product. The problem for me with Assassin's Creed Odyssey, though, and something that really frustrated me was Ubisoft's really shoving the store front and center in your face. I think they were called Helix points or Helix tokens. But essentially, you couldn't really escape the fact that there was a microtransaction currency looming over the game. And unless you invested in experience boosters or some other packs, the gear packs, the game really grinded to a halt. So much so that in playing, I had completed all of the side quests and I still was too low of a level to proceed to the next area in Odyssey. And that should never happen. The golden path essentially should be enough experience to get you through the story if you want it to, with the side quest amplifying maybe side characters, maybe some side beats on the back of the main character, definitely better gear to make the next area more fun. It's definitely the place where your completionists go to get every little nugget of lore and every cool piece of gear in the game. But Assassin's Creed Odyssey made that a hard requirement, and it burned me out. I just was spending so long doing those long battlefields where you'd pick a side, fighting through everything, killing everybody, just being basically, I played as Cassandra, a one woman wrecking crew, and just never really getting ahead. And I just got burnt out. I would like to go back and beat the game just for completion's sake, I guess. But I will definitely be using a trainer on my computer. If you're not familiar with that term, it's essentially an overarching program that allows you to make modifications to the game. So I'll probably give myself a generous boost of experience points and some levels so that I could just kind of blow through the rest of the game. And I don't know really if people criticize that as hard as really Jim Sterling did. A lot of people blindly love this game, but it really did start to get rumblings as time went on that unfortunately the grind was just a little too much. And that's at least my thoughts on it. Now, they did have a very robust set of DLC after it, a lot of expansions to continue on the story. Ultimately, the game ended up at a very, very respectable Metacritic score in the mid 80s, depending on if you're on the PC or the Xbox. I guess I think it's a slightly difference of performance. I think on the PlayStation, it was like not as good, but it sold very, very well. And it was nominated for a slew of awards. I'm just scrolling through here. It looks like it didn't win much of anything other than an artistic game from the Titanium Awards. But the fact that it was even talked about in, some of the other games that year is phenomenal. But despite all that, Assassin's Creed took some time off. Now, I suspect a lot of that has had to do with really the poor sale of the Division 2 coming out, definitely Ghost Recon Breakpoint coming out, and Yves Guillemot and Ubisoft, unfortunately, kind of turning all their games into the same game. A lot of those gear scores and this open world-itis that Ubisoft suffered, you are seeing the same game across multiple franchises. And to me, Odyssey really kind of, even though Origins really did start, something magical with a complete rebranding of gear score and everything, I feel like Assassin's Creed has kind of lost its identity. But I would go further to say that Far Cry has lost its identity, and The Division has lost its identity, and definitely Ghost Recon has lost its identity as well. So you're seeing a lot of these games that all just are the same thing. You just want to play in modern days with a little goofy side quest, go play Far Cry. If you want to have a lot of guns, go play The Division. If you want to fight robots, I guess, go play Ghost Recon Breakpoint. And if you want to stick to more kind of medieval sword and board times, go play Assassin's Creed. And Ubisoft took a lot of criticism and a lot of self-reflection to basically say, hey, we're going to pump the brakes on some of our games. Most notably, Watch Dogs 2 was one of those games that was I'm sorry, not Watch Dogs 2. Watch Dogs 2 already came out. Watch Dogs Legion. We're gonna delay that. They went back to the drawing board and basically retooled Ghost Recon, although I think the game's still not that great. But my point is they took some time off. So we got another 2-year break between Odyssey and Valhalla coming out later this year. So my hopes were really high. I wanted to lay that out for you guys going into a little bit of this gameplay discussion. I'm looking at my clock. Yes, I know I've been talking about the history of Assassin's Creed, but I think it's relevant to understand where I'm going with this. And really, by the time Odyssey came out, I feel like Assassin's Creed had taken a huge leap in the series and then kind of stagnated again. Really not so much just compared to Assassin's Creed, just to Ubisoft as a whole. We got a 2-year break. And now we're going to get to see Assassin's Creed Valhalla for a real. officially launched later this year. I believe it's July 12th that the Ubisoft event is going to be, and they're going to definitely show some actual gameplay, not like that horseshit thing they did on the Xbox where they said it was gameplay and it was some bogus trailer, but whatever. We'll probably see a lot more gameplay. It's definitely going to be a big talking point going into the next generation of consoles. We'll probably see some PlayStation 5, enhancements or Xbox Series X enhancements. For me, I'm a PC guy really at this point on a lot of this stuff. I would just get it on PC. It looks infinitely better. Playing Odyssey at a nice 60 frames a second, ultra widescreen, infinite draw distance. It's a beautiful game. No doubt about it. Assassin's Creed and really Ubisoft as a whole makes phenomenally gorgeous games. The question is, what have they done in the past 2 years? And the answer is not much based on what I saw. And that's really disappointing. So the gameplay is less than ideal. It's clearly not optimized. There's a lot of hitching. The light levels are very off, so I'm not sure if somebody was recording it. I'm sure, however they smuggled it out of Ubisoft's headquarters. It's very dark. It's hard to see what's going on. There's definitely some major lighting issues. I'm not holding any of that against the game. I know that Ubisoft will fix all of those things before launch. The part that bothers me is the actual gameplay itself. And it looks just like a fresh coat of paint from Odyssey to Valhalla. So, me thinking this 2 year break, we were going to see something exciting and new, it looks like it's more of the same. You're still doing the very, waves and waves of combat against, very dumb AI. You're able to parry and block and roll out of the way just like you did in Odyssey. You have a skill tree that allows you to have 4 active abilities, just like in Odyssey, that have cooldowns, just like in Odyssey. They even have the kick, the infamous Spartan kick, from 300, where you Leonidas kicked that guy into the pit. And I know that was a big thing in Odyssey. I love to do that, is to fight an enemy up against, a part of a cliff and just boot them off, which was always hysterical. Unless they were really powerful and then they'd come running back up with like half their health bar, which was stupid, but I digress. It doesn't seem like a lot has changed. The gameplay portion that I saw, and there may be multiple leaks, but the one I saw was a raid on a building, or like a fortress rather, and you had to help out with the battering ram, which seemed like a very simple mini game that was impossible to fail. Cinematically pretty, but you bust through the gate, you're climbing over the wall, the base is now on fire, you're shooting fire arrows, lighting guards on fire, kind of working your way through to the big bad. Then this big battle ensues. Doesn't look like any new mechanics have been added. It's just basically a larger version of a standard guard who has a bigger health bar, but there wasn't any interesting mechanics that they implemented, so it didn't feel like a real boss fight per se. And then at the end, you are given the choice as to whether or not to keep them, spare them or kill them, which I am sure has some story ramifications in it. I would hope so. Seems like it would. So I have confidence in that. But really, it's just the same thing. And I'm like, oh, come on. Like, you guys had 2 years to work on this, and this is what you came up with. It's really disappointing. Now, I guess if there's any silver lining to this, we did get to see a snippet of the skill tree system, which is nothing new, but this is more of a web, basically, where really plagiarized off of many other games, but most notably, if you want to see this in action, go look at Ghost Recon Breakpoint. And it's basically a skill tree that unlocks a node, which unlocks a couple smaller supporting skills, and then you kind of step points and you expand your skill tree outward. In this case, it's constellations. It's irrelevant. It doesn't matter. The fact that it's in outer space doesn't mean anything. It's more that it's that same idea where you're taking skill points and kind of scattering them around to unlock new things. So you could take like more of a warrior path and get more things like health, or maybe there's more of like a stealth path, and it'll diverge, and you'll have to kind of make some difficult choices on kind of where you want your character to end up. And I do appreciate that freedom, but Really nothing new here. So it's disappointing. I've personally held off on getting the collector's edition initially because I wasn't sure if this was the game for me. I really want to fall in love with Assassin's Creed. I want that magic to be rekindled from the first Assassin's Creed for me or any of the ones with Ezio. But really, since then, outside of Black Flag, more for the exploration than anything else. I just haven't really found an Assassin's Creed game that I'm in love with. And honestly, after seeing a pseudo open world in The Last of Us 2 and seeing how original and unique and exciting those graphics and that gameplay was, obviously, it's not a great comparison, but my point is the Assassin's Creed universe could have done more, and they really didn't. And it's frustrating. I hope there's more to this game. I hope this leak is just a very small sample and we're going to get some really cool mechanics. But I just didn't see it here and it worries me. So I think Ubisoft, whether this leak was intentional or not, definitely has a lot to prove in this upcoming event. And I am sure the diehard fans like Brent are going to love this game no matter what. I think people like me are probably going to be a little more skeptical, especially if there's some other good games coming out around that time. But with Ghost Tsushima on the horizon, and I'm sorry if I butchered the way I said that. I know I say it. Sometimes I say Ghost, sometimes I say Ghost, sometimes I say Shushima, sometimes I say Toshijima. The upcoming PlayStation exclusive Ninja game. To me, really, and I don't know, I haven't played it yet. If that game has nailed a very good balance between stealth and combat, I would see that as the most direct relation to an Assassin's Creed game. And Assassin's Creed to me needs to get back into that stealth. And they need to get back into the fact that you should be able to be rewarded for sneaking up to an enemy to kill them, and I hope we see some of that. This did not feel like that. This felt exactly like Odyssey, and Odyssey to me was more of a clumsy brawler than anything else. So I guess it remains to be seen. I don't know. I'm nervous. I want to hear from you guys who got a chance to see it. I'm not going to be posting a link to it. Just Google it on your own. You will find it. People have uploaded it on so many different platforms now that it's very easy to find. Whether you find it on, people have made it into a GIF format. I've seen it on Twitch being broadcast. I've seen it on TikTok, obviously on YouTube. So if you want to find it, you can. I'm not going to be posting that here. But if you did see it, I want to hear your thoughts on it. And I want to know what your thoughts are on kind of the history right now of Assassin's Creed, at least as I've laid out. Am I demanding too much? Are we happy with Assassin's Creed Odyssey and the Origins kind of template going forward? If we just have a repaint and a reskin of that, is that good enough? Do we demand more, especially for launch titles, or is that with a new console, or is that irrelevant? Leave some thoughts below. Let me know your opinion. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. A little long today, but I thought it was worth doing, especially kind of just walking through everything. So thank you so much if you made it to the end. Take care of yourselves, and until next time, I will see you guys on the other side.